It's 20:45 by my watch. 15 more minutes, it's only 15 minutes, and I'll find out whether this story ends well or not. You see, for those wondering, this will be when Rita's closes. She'll come out the front door, and I'll know. It wasn't always like this. No, sir, not like that at all. Not too long ago I was. Well, let me see. Do you have a minute? My name is Calvin York, not that Calvin York. He was a war hero. I'm a nobody, and a short one at that, just 5'9", barely 160 pounds, brown hair and eyes, raised by a single mother. See, like I said, no one. I grew up and still live in a small town. Well, still pretty small, being swallowed up by the D.C. suburbs. Well, sort of. It's near Winchester, Virginia. Went to public school, from which I graduated about 15 years ago. So that makes me do some math. My best friend was Jason Wareheim. He is a year older, ash blonde, blue eyes, taller than me, used to be muscular, once a fighter, a real ladies' man. Yes, girls flock to him. He comes from a good family, mom, dad, 2 older sisters. The girl who occupies a central place in this story, her name was Arlene Daniels. Until she got married, she married me. Her mom and dad were divorced. Arlene grew up with her mother and second husband. Arlene is a great person, dark brown hair and eyes, 5'4", maybe 120 pounds, very good figure. Arlene, she was always popular, 2 years younger than me, dating boys several years older than her. I think I became seriously interested in Arlene when she was in 10th grade. It was at her 10th grade birthday party in October. Hell, she had good looks. She was dating a guy who had already graduated, had a car, a job, and money. I never really liked him. Her parents did too, and soon after the party they forced her to end the relationship. I thought this would be my chance. I was wrong. Arlene was forced to ditch the working man, but before I could make my move, Jason intervened. Jason had already graduated and, like the other guy, had a job, a car, and money, so Arlene was an easy target for him. I think they hit it off right away because he bought her a ring, a cheap silver ring, no stones, and pretty soon she was wearing it everywhere. What did I do? Well, I played on the field. This meant that I was told no almost all the time. Oh, there was a couple who went on a date with me. There were Cindy Applegate, Gwendolyn Smersbach, and, as a last resort, Caroline Corelli. When Jason met Arlene, I was a high school senior, working part-time, and sharing a rickety old 1987's 10 jacket with my mom. I promise there's not much in this story about cars. Jason drove a 1997 Ford Explorer. Jason and I went on a lot of double dates, but as luck would have it, Jason's much nicer and new Explorer was spending a lot of time at the store, transmission, a couple of accidents, and some steering problems. My old's 10, it just had a lot of rust on it, so it worked pretty reliably. By the time she was a senior, she was 18 and I went to community college. She and Jason had a regular program in my backseat. I mean, it was always the same. All good things must come to an end, and that's exactly what happened to Jason and Arlene. One day Jason came to see me. I was just finishing up my first semester of my sophomore year at community college when Jason told me about his plans. Jason explained that at the warehouse where he worked, he wasn't going anywhere. There is nothing surprising. I told him that operating a forklift was a dead-end job. Jason said he needed to do something, so he joined the Navy. He figured it was a 4-year wait. He'd learn how to do something, and if not, he'd get veterans' benefits that would get him into a good college when he got out. I told him to do what I did. I joined the National Guard, but Jason said he wanted a full loaf. I wished him well. He and I and a few friends spent that last night together, and the next day he left for his new life. I didn't let Jason's departure get the better of me. I waited a couple of weeks and called Arlene. I'll finally get my big chance. She was supposed to be mine. I didn't make any commitment to anyone, so I called and asked her out, and she agreed to see me. We immediately hit it off, and 3 weeks later, we were sitting in the back of my mother's S10. I was still living at home. Life has finally come full circle, and I have achieved my heart's desire. A long and happy life has arrived. Then the other shoe dropped. I didn't even know the first shoe existed until Arlene told me one evening that she was pregnant. If I were anyone, I would be a man. I wanted her so much that I told her we were getting married. That's when she told me that she was 4 months pregnant, and the baby was definitely not mine. She wouldn't say it, but I knew it was so. Call me a fool, a dreamer, call me whatever you want, but I remained true to my proposal. We got married in a small civil ceremony. I dropped out of college, used what little brain I had to get a job at UPS, and Arlene moved in with me and my mom. Arlene stayed at home. We went to Lamaze classes, bought furniture, decorated the nursery, listened to the baby's tiny heartbeat, and later felt her kicks. We were able to have a baby shower. Cindy, Gwen, and Caroline, whom I hated at the time, even came and brought gifts. A few months after our wedding, a child was born. She was a beautiful little girl whom we named Charlotte. We continued to live with my mother. Arlene stayed home and took care of our baby, and she was our baby. I mean, I loved her from the very beginning. My mom worked at Walmart and helped out whenever she could. I continued to work at UPS, but returned to real school. I planned to become a phlebotomist. Of course, they didn't make a lot of money, but I figured it was just the first step. I planned to go from a phlebotomist to PA, and then perhaps I will become a real doctor. I had high hopes, but I was a husband and a dad, and I had responsibilities. Years passed. I became a phlebotomist, gained more education and experience, and became a physician assistant working with people with back problems. The money was not great, but I felt that things were moving forward. I knew we were on the right track. All this time, I loved Arlene with all my heart, but I knew that our relationship was not perfect. I knew she loved me, at least in her own way, but the fire and enthusiasm that I saw in her with Jason was not there for me. She loved me, I knew she loved me, she told me she loved me, but it wasn't quite the same. She told me she didn't want more children and one was enough. I did not care. I loved her, and I loved our little girl absolutely unabashedly. Charlotte was everything to me, my life, my love, my everything. The years continued to fly by. All my old friends found husbands or careers. Gwendolyn met and married an insurance salesman. They settled down, bought a beautiful house near Luray, and began having children. Cindy met a pharmacist who lived in Winchester. They divorced, but then she found an electrician, and from what I heard, they had 4 children. Caroline went to college just as her parents had planned. She earned a degree in education and found a good position teaching elementary education in Frederick County schools. When Charlotte started high school, things started to go south. Charlotte was only 14 and entering the 9th grade when I began to notice changes in Arlene's behavior. Arlene, always a stay-at-home mom, never worked. For me, it was good. We were still at my mother's. She, this is Arlene, cooked and cleaned, did the laundry and did all the housework. But then I began to notice some discreet changes. Sometimes I would call home and Arlene wouldn't be there. Sometimes Arlene said she needed to go out at night, something she had rarely ever done before. I noticed that on the evenings when she went out, she was always very nicely dressed and often came home a little later than was convenient for me. I also noticed a change in her clothing. Nicer dresses, shorter skirts, more perfume, and, for the first time in years, high heels. Her behavior never changed in any case. She became more attentive, dinners became better, conversations became more polite. There were no complaints. I didn't want to seem like a suspicious jerk, so I never asked her anything. And finally, that fateful day came. I came home from a grueling day shift, listening to scores of older men and women complain about things only God could control, and there sat Arlene at the kitchen table. The conversation still rings in my ears. "Calvin," she said, "you know I love you. I've always loved you, but—" All this was new to me. "What is the problem?" I asked. "I want a divorce." "What? Divorce? I want to move on with my life." My guts literally turned to ice. For 15 years, she was the center of my universe. Well, almost the center, considering Charlotte. I asked, "What happened?" And she said, "You know, Cal, I love you. I always loved you, but I was never in love with you." I knew deep down that one partner always loved the other more, and I accepted that, but the thought of Arlene leaving never crossed my mind, so I asked, "Did I do something? Look, I can fix anything." "This is true. Just tell me." She interrupted me. "Jason is home." I was stunned. I had to sit up. "Jason." "Yes, he returned home. He came back about 4 months ago, and—" I didn't need another rock falling on me. I could understand that. I counted down 3 months. It went something like this. "Have you met him?" "We didn't mean to hurt you." I didn't know what to say. "Arlene, I love you. I have always loved you. I thought you loved me. You married me." She looked impatient. She sighed. "Look, I married you. You gave my child a name, and for 16 years I was faithful. I ironed your clothes, cleaned your dirty shorts, cooked you food, and made love to you. But I think 16 years of gratitude is more than enough." Gratitude. Gratitude. Did she say thank you? It was too much. I was shocked, speechless. "What, are you going to move out?" "I'm so sorry, Cal." "True, but you knew that you were always second. He has an apartment near Romney. Charlotte and I." "Charlotte? Wait, what does this have to do with Charlotte?" I watched as Arlene hesitated. "Well, Jason is her real father, and I assumed." "What? You assumed that? That Charlotte will leave with you? Well, to hell with it." I was devastated. Losing Arlene to Jason without saying a word for over 15 years was one thing, but Charlotte was mine. At that moment, I realized how little I must have meant to Arlene, and it did something to me. Something inside me just died. I could barely speak. "No, Arlene, Charlotte is mine. She is my daughter. Listen to me, she's mine." Just then Charlotte poked her head in. "Mother, father, why are you fighting, and why did you mention me?" I looked at Arlene. "Tell her." We both looked at the brown-haired, blue-eyed angel standing in front of us, and Arlene said, "You know Calvin is not your real daddy. Your real dad has returned home. He lives in Romney, and we are going to live with him." Charlotte looked from Mom to me, then said to me, "What is she saying about Dad?" I told her, "Your mother was pregnant when I asked her to marry me. The man who confused her ran away and joined the Navy. He's back, and your mom wants to go and take you with her." Charlotte looked from me to her mother. She never knew. She looked at me. "You are my father." I stood up and walked towards her, but did not touch her. "I am your father. I am your father for life." Charlotte looked at Arlene. "Do you want to leave us?" Arlene shuddered. "We're not leaving. We're leaving, that's all. Your real father loves you. He wants to be with you. Don't worry, we'll come back and visit." I watched Charlotte. There she stood, straight a student in every grade, from kindergarten to high school, hardly missing a day, playing the clarinet, taking dance lessons, singing in the church choir, teaching slower children. She was everything any parent could want, and she was mine. I was close to tears. "Charlotte, it is true that your mother became pregnant by another man, but you know who your dad is." Charlotte asked me, "Do you know?" I mean, she was. "Not like that at first," I replied. "It took about a month, but I loved her, and I knew I would love you, and I loved you too from the moment I first saw you. You were always mine, my little girl." It was obvious that this revelation was too much for Charlotte. She looked from me to Arlene and said, "I need to get myself organized. I have a dance." She looked at me. "You'll take me, right?" I smiled. "Have I always?" Charlotte ran out of the room. That evening, I took Charlotte to the dance. Later, Arlene and I entered into a battle royale. It seemed like she had quit many times over the years, and a lot of pent-up anger had come to the surface. First, I know that I listened to my mom and Arlene constantly argue about who knew best what was good for Charlotte. I avoided it for the most part, but often I would sort of side with Mom, even though I knew Arlene had every right to tell Mom to just shut up. Charlotte wasn't my mom's daughter, and she shouldn't have trained Arlene all these years. Again, it was my fault that we stayed at my mom's. We should have moved and built our own house. It was unsettling, but I knew I needed to look in the mirror at my behavior. Arlene chose Jason over me, and I never got over it. I knew I had let it fester inside me, and there were times when Arlene was particularly pleased that I would deliberately pick a fight. Then sometimes, when we made love in bed, I wondered if she was thinking about me or him. It was easy for me to imagine the two of them. I've seen enough of them in the back seat of my mom's old car. Sometimes I deliberately did things to humiliate her. And with Charlotte, I knew she was not completely mine, and sometimes I used that to hurt Arlene. No, I didn't tell her about her pregnancy, but I tried my best to anger her with my condescension. Charlotte used it too, and I actually liked it because I knew it hurt Arlene. Arlene was born into a dysfunctional family, her stepfather was too lenient, and she wanted to do right by her daughter. Yes, I could have done things differently. Nobody is perfect. Just like that, I got angry. I didn't care whose DNA it was. Charlotte was my child. Arlene eventually agreed to leave that night, but vowed that she would return for Charlotte. She also promised that Jason would come back, and I would have to deal with him. However, to be honest, even after all these years I did it. I didn't care if she stayed or went. It was very painful, and I'll be damned if I didn't feel a little, no, very unhappy because of all this thing. I remember when I was in high school, Arlene was my biggest dream, but almost immediately after we got married, I started having doubts. Oh, Arlene was great in bed, but other than that there wasn't much there, at least not at first. I discovered that my initial love for Arlene was a fantasy. If I had thought things through, I might never have married her. But over time, with the arrival of Charlotte, I developed a different attachment to Arlene, an attachment based on our shared love for our daughter and other things that had nothing to do with sex, but were little things that I simply could not express words. After she left that night, I wondered if she had similar thoughts. She left, but a couple of days later, she actually came back and Jason was with her. Honestly, for a guy who was supposed to serve in the army for 16 years, he didn't look like much. A slender 32-inch waist became a cool 50. The bags under his drooping eyes, coupled with flabby muscles, suggested a soft life, probably a life that included too much booze, too many easy women, and too much hearty food. Jesus, this guy was only, 35 or 36. He looked 50. They returned in the evening. Charlotte was at home, but fortunately my mother was not at home. They walked up. He looked at Charlotte, and the first thing out of that asshole's mouth was, "Hey, baby, it's me, your dad." I cringed and saw the look in his eyes. It was not the look with which a father looks at his daughter. Charlotte saw it too. She came and stood next to me. Grabbing my hand, she replied, "Who are you?" Like the Cheshire Cat in Alice, he smiled. "I'm your daddy, darling. I'm here for you now." She squeezed my arm so tightly that I was afraid she would break something, maybe my ulna. She was also shaking nervously. Then, hugging me, she said, "You are mistaken, sir. It's my father. I have no idea who you are, and I don't want to know." I saw the look on Jason's face. I think he was relieved, but Arlene intervened. "Charlotte, this is your real father. Now he is here for you." I sensed Charlotte's confusion. It was time for her real father to take the initiative, so I did. "Arlene, if he is the one you want, I can't stop you. I'll be meeting with a lawyer later this week. I'm sure something can be worked out. But remind me that this is my mother's house, and you have not worked a single day during our marriage." I was grateful my mom wasn't there. I don't know how she would have dealt with it. I didn't think she would handle it well. I added, "I am convinced that we can offer you a good settlement, and Charlotte is at the age to decide for herself with whom she wants to live." I felt additional tension in this matter. Jason then looked from Arlene to Charlotte. He told Charlotte, "We'd love for you to move in with us as soon as we're settled." Charlotte ignored him. Jason took Arlene's hand. "Come on, honey. We'll let the lawyers handle this." And with that, he dragged her out of the house. As soon as they left, Charlotte began to cry. I took her into the living room. We sat on the sofa, and she cried almost all night. Over and over, she asked the same questions. Why did Mommy have to leave like that? And why didn't anyone tell her about this man? I didn't have an answer to any of them. To be honest, I wasn't so sure how it would all end. Even though Jason seemed relieved that he didn't have to deal with a teenage daughter, I got a different impression from Arlene. He had to drag her out of the house. I wondered if she knew what she was doing. It didn't take long for Arlene to figure things out. She returned to the house 3 weeks after leaving. She chose the time to come back when she knew that both Charlotte and my mother would be gone, but I would be home. She appeared with a kind of swagger that was completely uncharacteristic. I wasn't being unkind, but I asked her what she wanted. She fainted. "Cal, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I want to go home." I stepped back and held the door open. "Do you want to come in and talk about it?" Together, we returned to the kitchen. She sat down at the kitchen table and started crying. She must have cried for about 20 minutes straight. Finally, I asked her, "So why are you here? What do you want?" She hesitated for just a second. Then she cried again, but this time she managed to squeeze out a few words. "Cal, I love you. I'm serious. I love you. No, I love you. I'm just so sorry I made a terrible mistake. Oh, honey, do you remember what it was like when we were all in high school? Jason was my hero, my ideal man. But when he left, I remember how I kept pretending that he left to protect us, that he didn't just run away, that he would come back for me one day. I realized in my mind that he was still the boy I dated in high school, and that you were his, runner-up, his backup. Yes, I got it. She was my fantasy and Jason was hers. While he was away, the fantasy remained safely hidden, perhaps in some dreamy corner of her mind and heart, but when he returned, reality set in. I remember confronting my misconceptions about her and moving on. Between me and Arlene was Charlotte. We shared it, and together, for me it made us whole. I think Arlene saw it now, too. I asked her, "So what do you want now?" She burst into tears again. "I am eager to return home. I long to regain my true existence. Oh, the regrets torment me. I regret my previous statements. I would like to see what I had, who I really was, what kind of life you and I shared, and what a wonderful existence we led. I was so unreasonable because I had a wonderful companion, a loving husband, and an amazing father. I beg you, return me to my previous state." I asked, "And what do you want me to do?" She walked around the kitchen table and knelt down. She hugged my legs. "I want you to give me my life back. I want my husband back. I want my little girl. I want to pretend none of this ever happened." I dropped to the floor next to her. "No, we can't do this. This won't be enough. This is what I suggest. I suggest starting over. Sort of. We'll leave. Damn it, my mom won't be okay until she's in her 50s. We'll buy something of our own. It will be just ours, mine and Charlotte's, as long as she wants. We should have done this a long time ago. And will you forgive me?" I hugged her. "Honey, I can forgive you. This will be the easy part. But can you put Jason in your rearview mirror? And we need to see what Charlotte thinks." She hugged me. "Oh, Jason, he is history. He was a person who never really existed. But Charlotte, what do you think?" I looked at my watch. 2 as in PM. "Arlene, go see your mom and dad. Wait there. Charlotte has a little job at Rita's right after school. Let me see what she thinks." She cried again. "Oh, Calvin, I'm really sorry. I would like." I helped her up. "Now let's go. Go see your mom. Ask her to make you coffee. Let her prepare a batch of cakes. I'll call you later." I managed to get Arlene to her car, a small Nissan. Then I got into my Chevrolet pickup truck and drove to the high school. I got to school and waited. Charlotte has been gloomy since her mother left. She was angry with her, but she missed her terribly. Between tears and anger, she did not sleep. As she climbed into the truck, I said, "Your mom came by this afternoon." Charlotte started to defend herself. "Really? What did she want?" "She wants to go home." Charlotte asked, "Are you going to let her? I mean, can you trust her after what she did?" "I've already thought about it." My guess is that Arlene compared her childhood fantasies with her adult reality and made a decision. Will she remain faithful? I thought so. She had been faithful for over 15 years, so I said, I think I can, but that's not the question. The question for me is, are you ready to let her come back? Rita looked at me. Can I think about it, Dad? This is my girl, I thought. I asked, how much time do you need? Can I tell you tonight after work? I said, of course. And here I am standing next to Rita and waiting for my daughter. I'll know what our life will be like when I see her face. Oh, I see her now. And she smiles. Yes, we're back together. Should this be considered a happy ending? No, these things only happen in fairy tales and Hallmark movies. But still, we began to rebuild our lives. They bought their own house, a cozy and warm nest, and even allocated a separate room for my mother so that she could live with them. As far as Calvin is concerned, life goes on. I may never become a doctor, but the salary of a medical assistant is quite decent and allows me to live comfortably. Charlotte is an excellent student, and her grades are high enough to get her into one of the top public colleges, which definitely makes me happy. Arlene is helping out more now and has found a part-time job at Lowe's and seems to really enjoy her job. As for Jason, since then there has been no word or breath about him, as if he had disappeared. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had followed Carolyn Corelli. After all, she never got married, you know. But this is just another fantasy, a dream that may never come true. In the end, I think I'll stick with what I have, and you know, it's not that bad. Life goes on, and there is always room for new opportunities and hopes. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click.